Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the unforgetting riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Parliament's risen for the summer, and the Liberals are desperately hoping Canadians will forget about this year's scandals to date. First, let's see if we can spot a pattern. In February of 2019, the Globe and Mail broke a story of Trudeau's political interference in the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. Initially, Trudeau claimed it was fake news. In March, reporters got their hands on a tape-recorded conversation between Jody Wilson-Raybould and the head of the public service, in which he pressured her to get a special deal for SNC-Lavalin. That April, Trudeau fired Jody Wilson-Raybould for not agreeing to keep quiet about his corruption. The Trudeau Liberals blocked all avenues of investigation for the rest of the spring. It wasn't until the middle of the summer when the Ethics Commissioner released his report finding that Trudeau was guilty of breaching the conflict of interest law. Again, shortly after, Trudeau called the 2019 election and saw his majority reduced to a minority. The Globe and Mail broke another story in the spring of 2020. It turns out Trudeau and Bill Morneau had planned to hand We Charity a sole-sourced contract to manage a $1 billion program. A program cooked up by We Charity and the Liberals. First, Trudeau and Morneau denied the news reports. Then they tried every avenue to block the investigation. They hoped to use the summer to distract from the scandal. The Liberals refer to it as the beauty of summer amnesia. It wasn't until the following spring that the Ethics Commissioner released his report finding Bill Morneau guilty of breaking the conflict of interest law. Of course, by that time, Trudeau had already pushed out Bill Morneau for refusing to even run bigger deficits. Flash forward to this year, and it was the Globe and Mail that broke more stories about Trudeau. Again, Trudeau tried to claim the reports were inaccurate. Again, Trudeau tried everything he could to delay any kind of real investigation. And just to be safe, Trudeau failed to appoint a new ethics commissioner after he tried to appoint a sister-in-law to a Liberal cabinet minister as acting ethics commissioner. Once again, the Liberals are desperately hoping Canadians will forget their corruption and incompetence over the summer. The difference between 2019 and 2020 and today is that Trudeau has effectively destroyed Canada's news media industry. Ronald Reagan once said the 9 most terrifying words are, quote, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," unquote. For the last 4 years, Canada's legacy media outlets have been begging the Liberals for help. With the passage of Trudeau's Online News Censorship Act, they got their wish. Thanks to the government's help, Canadian news sites will now be blocked from sharing their content on Facebook, Instagram, and Google. This will cost the legacy media millions of dollars in lost revenue from the decline in web traffic. Last week, Bell announced 1,300 layoffs and massive cuts to its news division. This week, we learned Post Media and owners of the National Post, or the owners of the National Post, and the Ottawa Citizen is in talks to merge with Nordstar, owners of the Toronto Star, the Empire Chronicle Guide, and the Renfrew Mercury. Now, the Minister of Misinformation and Montreal Heritage is panicking. He's begging Facebook and Google to ignore the law he just passed and cut a special deal with him. When asked what he will do if begging doesn't work, the minister said all options are on the table, including using taxpayer dollars to prop up dying businesses. This is just so typical of the Trudeau Liberals. Every single person with a spot of common sense tells them their policy is going to backfire. Whether that was a link tax for just 2 companies, or regulating streaming, or giving out free drugs, or granting bail to repeat violent offenders, or taxing carbon dioxide to stop forest fires. And when their policy fails in horrific fashion, such as when 2 companies block links, or when streamers leave Canada, or as children continue dying from government-issued opioids, or when convicted felons kill cops. When it fails, they blame Stephen Harper. Then they announce their plan to spend billions of dollars more. Over and over again with these Liberals, it's rinse, fail, repeat. Many Canadians recall the thunderous applause our supposedly nonpartisan public service at Global Affairs gave Trudeau when he visited the office shortly after his first election. In typical Trudeauvian arrogance, he announced that Canada is back. What he meant is that our previous foreign policy based on national interests and principles would be abandoned for the Liberal approach to go along and get along. To the surprise of no one, this Liberal policy also failed. What is surprising is that the calls are coming from inside the House. It was Trudeau's hand-picked Foreign Minister, Mélanie Joly, who said Canada was losing influence in the world. Of course, every foreign minister in Canada's history has told every prime minister that to increase Canada's influence in the world, they'll need a bigger budget. Yet even with the massive budget she has, her department closed Canada's Arctic office at the same time the Prime Minister was at an Arctic summit, claiming Canada would take a leadership role in the Arctic. This is typical of Canada under Liberal prime ministers. They talk and they talk, but when the check comes due, they skip out. They are all show and no substance. Our allies are taking notice and moving on without us. Meanwhile, the only country the Trudeau Liberals seem to be influencing is the country controlled by a communist dictatorship. This week, we learned that the communists who control China were so impressed by the Liberals' online streaming censorship act that they are introducing a version of their own. According to the Communist Party's state broadcaster, the draft law requires online content providers to strengthen the creation and dissemination of patriotic content. The draft law also contains specific provisions targeting people who have left or fled communism. Under Trudeau, Canada is back to inspiring a communist dictatorship to aspire towards even greater levels of cultural nationalism. Many Canadians rightly feared Trudeau's open admiration for communism would see him import dangerous socialist policies to Canada. Who could have guessed the people living under communist control in China would be as afraid of Canada's influence in their country? Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant.